focused our attention on 5 strategic areas of focus over the past 6 months while managing this pandemic and resulting recession. Those 5 things have been: 1, sharing information and resources; 2, providing valuable programming and connection opportunities for our members; 3, advocating on behalf of the business community; and 4, rebuilding and recovery. We are delighted to have the U.S. Chamber here with us today to give an economic outlook to discuss what Phase 4 legislation may look like and what it means for small businesses and communities and workforce training. Also a reminder, the South Tampa Chamber will be hosting a Resiliency 101 workshop series September 21st through the 25th, which will focus on preparing your business before a catastrophe hits, excuse me. Speakers will include the Tampa Regional Planning Council, City of Tampa, USF, Muma College of Business, U.S. Chamber, and FBI, who will share practical information on strengthening our business community in a measurable way in light of recent events, those to come. I would now like to introduce our speakers today. Please feel free to include questions in the chat feature that Erica mentioned here on Zoom. And if there's time, we'll also be able to open Zoom for questions. And those speakers today are Tom Sullivan. He's the Vice President, Small Business Policy of the U.S. Chamber, and Josh Westfall, the Director of Policy and Programs, Workforce and Education, and he's with the U.S. Chamber Foundation. And I'll give it over to you, Tom.
Oh, thank you, Chris. I had to check to make sure I wasn't muted like we all do now in our new normal. But first of all, before I get started, I want to say how happy I am to join a group of recent Tom Brady converts. I grew up in New England, so I have my patriotic Patriots hat, and I understand from Chris and Erica that Tom Brady and Gronk were going to give the Phase 4 stimulus update, and I'm happy to provide kind of backup since they weren't available. I'm jealous of y'all being able to see 2 great athletes perform down there for Tampa. So I am now a Bucks fan. Right now, I'm going to share the screen. But before I do, I want to give a special shout out to the participants. So Bo, I love the picture of your dog. And then Shane, I got to say, your background, your background makes it look like you have a graduation cap on, which I found particularly enjoyable. So I only have 3 slides. Now, the reason I have slides is not just to provide kind of a visual aid to follow along about Phase 4 and small business, but it's also to keep me from going down a rabbit hole. I am a passionate small business advocate, and I tend to get kind of wound up about these things. And then I end up taking 20, 40, 50 minutes without actually getting through the material. So truth be told, these 3 slides are primarily to keep me on track, and certainly Erica will share them with all of you. I also, before getting into these slides, do want to explain that we are joined by our regional head, Moore Hallmark. Not only is Moore our regional head down in the Southeast area, but he actually heads our entire regional team, who are our primary liaison between local chambers and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. I'm a little bit biased because I'm a small business guy, but I believe that the U.S. Chamber of Commerce's muscle when it comes to advocacy is our partnership with the South Tampa Chamber of Commerce, and between 1,600 and 2,000 of your closest peers, the state and local chambers of commerce around the United States. So Moore heads the team who do manage those relationships, and then Moore may admit in a weak moment that he also is biased to the Southeast because that's where he's based. So Moore, thank you for joining us. So
thank you, Tom.
Let's back up. Let's just back up 6 months. It seems like 6 years, but actually it was just 6 months ago. And the reason I want to back up is just to provide some sense of optimism that Congress can actually come together and help. So when the coronavirus, it was obvious that the coronavirus was going to significantly impact our economy. It came together in almost a unanimous way, extremely bipartisan, and passed 4 pieces of legislation in less than 4 months, specifically to help small business. And now we're in a hyper-partisan stalemate the closer we get to the election. And so it seems like that is a distant memory. But it's good to know, though, that there is the opportunity where Congress can come together, because they have done this in the recent history. I also want to at least provide a little bit of some reference to PPP. You know, this is now an acronym that folks, one, can't say without spitting on a computer screen on these webinars, but two, understand that PPP is the SBA loan program and has provided some help to small businesses. And the numbers of the PPP are staggering from a contextual perspective, because in 4 months, the SBA's loan PPP program lent more loans to small business than in the entire 65-year history of the Small Business Administration. So when you step back and think, holy moly, Congress passes a law, in less than 3 weeks implements a brand new lending program, and then fast forward 4 months to all-time records in lending, you kind of get this sense of the true gravity of what we're dealing with. And it hasn't stopped. Not something that's on this slide here, but my boss at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is now referring to the recovery as a K-shaped recovery. So when you think of a K, you've got an upper V, and the V recovery was really what we all hope for. And that is that the extreme down, when all businesses were required to close, correspond with a sharp tick up in reopening, reemployment, and getting back to pre-pandemic sales levels. That has happened for some. So for instance, Paul Huzar, who runs a successful small business in the Tampa area, pivoted his business into commercial sanitation, cleaning, high quality, high grade sanitation of commercial buildings. Well, as you could imagine, that's kind of a hot industry right now. So he would have a V shape. Now, as I was telling Chris immediately before this call, you take this bakery in San Francisco, who's not only been battling the second time they've been closed, they've got California wildfires, the schools are all closed, so he's got to help educate his 3 kids that are all under 15 years old, getting online. So he's now a computer technician, and he's changing his bakery model from a retail model to a business-to-business sales. And he, not only does he have a hard time actually squeezing in 2 hours of sleep a night, but he also is having a hard time getting those sales numbers up. He would be the lower V that, and unfortunately, it's just kind of a straight decline, and it's leveled off. He did get a PPP. He did get an SBA economic injury disaster loan. Those have just allowed for him to survive. He is not actually growing to pre-pandemic levels. So that would be the lower part of the K that really needs help. I mean, he truly really needs help. So we measure some of these things, and some of these things are measured in our surveys that we do with MetLife. And our last MetLife survey, it's kind of good news, bad news. The good news is that if you compare May to March, small businesses are doing pretty good. But if you compare May this year to May last year, small businesses aren't doing good at all. That's when I pretend to be an economist. It's kind of on the one hand, on the other hand. So what are we doing about it? What's the topic of today's presentation is supposed to be phase 4 legislation. It's not necessarily going to be the economics and the data that just support what you're all feeling. It's, well, what are we doing about it? And we are pushing for Congress to take action. And when we're pushing Congress, that means that before Congress adjourns for the election, they have got to pass legislation that helps small business. Now, we believe that it's as easy as 1, 2, 3. So unfortunately, I am now going to put a song in all of your heads. It's the Jackson 5, easy as ABC, easy as 1, 2, 3. That's kind of the way that we say that it's easy for Congress to take action. You just make up a rhyme. In truth, there's actually 4 things, but there's no song about it's easy as 1, 2, 3, 4. So we decided to stick with the easy as 1, 2, 3. First of all, we're pushing to increase financial aid in a targeted and temporary way for those small businesses that need it most. So when you look at the K Street recovery, we're looking at the lower part of that K. These are businesses that haven't, that are experiencing sales at about 35% of where they were last year. They need help. The bill that Senator Majority Leader McConnell is pushing includes help, another round of PPP specifically for those businesses to get a second round of PPP loans, forgivable loans, and we think that that's the right place to start. 2, easy as 1, 2, 3. The second part is expanding the access to those loan programs. So when you talk about expanding, for instance, chambers of commerce have never been able to access the PPP program, which is crazy to me. In my mind, that's the equivalent of an emergency room doctor not being able to access the healthcare system. You've got the South Tampa Chamber of Commerce bringing together business leaders like all of you to help, and they can't even access the lending facilities themselves. That is insanity. And this is one of those really frustrating issues where from Speaker Pelosi to Leader McConnell to Chuck Schumer to the chair of the Senate Small Business Committee, Marco Rubio, your senator, when you ask them about it, they nod their head, but still nothing gets done. So in this skinny bill, they call it the skinny bill because it is scaled down from $1 trillion to about a $500 billion piece of legislation. There is the opportunity for 501c6 nonprofits, which are local and state chambers of commerce, to access the PPP program. Also extends that the PPP program that had $130 billion left when the application deadline hit on August 8th. Extends that forward so that solopreneurs, minority-owned businesses that weren't able to access PPP before still have an opportunity to get their first PPP loan. Third, easy as 1, 2, 3. The third is simplification. Couple of things on this. So this is kind of a classic case of government trying to help, but not really being helpful. I'm told that in a marital situation, sometimes husbands like me who want to help find out that actually we're not being very helpful. That's where simplification comes in here, is that sometimes when the federal government has tried to help, they've actually made it more complicated. I'll give you one specific example. In the PPP, when some of that money is forgiven, turns out that IRS is saying, well, the normal business expenses that you file, you can't get that business deduction because it's already been forgiven by PPP. Again, that's insanity. If the federal government is trying to free up cash for small business, you can't you shouldn't, on the one hand, say it's forgiven, and on the other hand, have IRS come in and say, oh yeah, but you can't deduct it anymore. That's nonsense. Senator Cornyn has worked with us to have a provision to fix that complication within the CARES Act, within the PPP program. We're optimistic that that will be part of legislation as well. And also from a simplification perspective, why should small businesses who have already certified on their PPP application that they're going to spend the money the correct way have to fill out reams of paperwork just to get it forgiven, which they already said that they were going to do in the first place? And so we've worked with Congress to say, look, if you have a loan, the majority of loans are under $150,000. Actually, the majority of loans are under $100,000. You should have a one check the box certification that you've complied with the way that the money is supposed to be spent, it's forgiven, that banks don't have to jump through the hurdles, small businesses don't have to jump through the hurdles. They can focus their attention on what they need to focus, and that is reopen, recover, get your revenues back up to where they were pre-pandemic. So easy as 1, 2, 3. Increased financial assistance, targeted and temporary for those who need it most. Expanded financial assistance to folks who have been shut out of the PPP program. Simplification. Well, what about number 4? Number 4 is liability protection. We have heard from small businesses all over the country, like, look, if we're taking the time and expense to do what we are supposed to do, and that is protect our employees, protect our customers, we have got to be protected from COVID-related lawsuits. And we've seen survey data from Goldman Sachs saying close to 80% of small businesses need that type of liability protection. The worst thing to happen is that you get that V-shaped recovery. The small business survives the pandemic and then gets hit with another disease, which is called plaintiff class action lawsuit. So we believe that there has to be liability protection. There is a liability protection in legislation that Majority Leader McConnell has said that he's going to get a vote on the Senate. So we're optimistic, although we're also pragmatic. It has been really frustrating, the lack of progress between Speaker Pelosi and Secretary Mnuchin of the Treasury, who is the primary administration's negotiator in further stimulus. I think the latest that we saw over the weekend, they agreed to not shut the government down, but certainly no agreement on whether stimulus can happen before the end of the government's fiscal year, which, as many of you know, is September 30th. All right, so I am told by some chamber friends that some of the resources that are listed here are what are called the R&D project. R&D stands for rip off and duplicate. And in that sense, every piece of information that we're trying to provide in English and in Spanish, we want you to rip off. We want you to plagiarize, because that is the most sincere form of flattery. When we worked with our Chamber of Commerce partners all across the United States to get those 4 pieces of legislation in place, we immediately then shifted gears, say, okay, well, these bills are in place, but how do we translate this information that small businesses can actually use them? And so we try to boil down tons and tons of information into things that are usable by small business owners, ranging from a checklist that a small business owner asks their employees before reporting to work every day to make sure that they're not sick or potentially contaminating others. Signs that could be hung on a retail store saying that this place is COVID-free. The guide for forgiveness this is not a Catholic thing that you use before you go to church, but is rather the guide for PPP forgiveness that in 4 easy steps leads a small business owner what types of records they should have in order before they go to their bank to file their forgiveness application. And then certainly a playbook for small business to reopen. And we include many of these tools, tips, and information. All of this is laid out on our small business digital portal, which is accessible at uschamber.com/co. And of course, we're always happy to answer information that is given to us either through Chris or Erica or others, and certainly more Hallmark and his team, to make sure that if you need any information, we are there to help. We are there to get you those answers. And so with that, I'll stop sharing the slides and answer any questions that folks might have. Let's see, I'm looking at the chat. Deductible expenses, cash flows. I hope changes are coming to address these important issues. So Stella, yes, we hope that the legislation also expands the forgivable items, as well as provides some more simplicity to the forgiveness form. So thank you for that comment. And yes, we are with you on that.
Tom, I have a question for you, if you don't mind.
I don't mind at all, Chris.
Have you seen any small employers getting hit with any lawsuits if or threats of lawsuits if they didn't use the PPP loans correctly? And my understanding is if they didn't use it correctly, it would just be forgiven, and that would be, and they would not be forgiven, and they would just have to pay it back. But I didn't know if you've seen that, if that's ever been any threat to any small employers out there.
So when we say lawsuits, I generally think of attorneys, but I think you're probably referring to more broadly, and the answer is yes. I've seen in the news, the press that accompanied a small business going out and using that PPP to buy a Lamborghini. I think that was in South Florida. They're in a lot of trouble, and the feds are going to throw what's that expression that my mom and dad used to say to me? They're going to throw the book at them, as they should. So we see those popping up. If there's a small business owner, especially that received over $2 million in PPP funds, the spending of those funds will be scrutinized closely. And if they were spent by mistake on the wrong thing, then it won't be forgiven. But if it was spent deliberately on stuff that is so obvious that a normal person would say that's no way what the PPP was used for, they're going to be they're going to be prosecuted by the feds.
Does anybody else have any questions for Tom while we have him available?
Tom, I heard you. This is Jen McDonald. Hi there. How are you?
Good.
You mentioned about the small business and the forgiveness of the loan. Are you really anticipating that they're going to be forgiving across the board with these qualified? You're saying you're looking for a more simplified process for the forgiveness. What do you think the odds are on that actually happening that way?
40%.
Okay.
But Jen, I'll tell you what, I am going to place in the chat what I believe to be the best resource for PPP forgiveness. Our friends at the Association for Accountants put out a forgiveness calculator. It is basically TurboTax for PPP forgiveness, but it's open sourced. It is, so I've had two small business owners who I work with regularly use this calculator. You plug in, just like TurboTax, you plug in the numbers and it spits out what you should expect for forgiveness. That actually, for me, that has been the most useful tool. And then individual banks are coming up with similar calculators and systems to help small business. But for me, I think that's one of the best. And I put that in the chat function. So hopefully you'll be able, that can help.
Thank you.
Chris, I see Joshua has joined us. Which is
perfect. Good. I was looking for his name, so that's perfect. There he is. So we'll turn it over to you, Joshua. And thanks again, Tom, for everything.
Boy, it's always hard to follow Tom after all the stuff he brings up and all the great resources. They keep doing this to me. Well, so I'm Josh Westfall. I work at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation at the Center for Education and Workforce. And I'm not sure if those on the call have been a part of these briefings before, but what I find to be the most interesting is that people find out that the Chamber has a foundation. So we are the 501c3 nonprofit of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. With our mission is to strengthen America's workforce and long-term competitiveness. So on the foundation side of things, again, we don't do any lobbying or any of that. We help a little bit with advocacy, but we're mostly looking into research and initiatives and programs that are on the ground to help businesses in the community to, again, strengthen the competitiveness in the workforce. And so at the Center for Education and Workforce, we are split into an early ed team, a K-12 team, and a workforce team, and we have a bunch of initiatives to talk about. But what has been happening is that we have grown so much and have now a lot of initiatives and programs that I can't actually cover them all at this briefing anymore, which I used to be able to do. So what I will do is I'm just going to quickly cover some high-level topics and give some ideas of like where to look, and then mostly keep it open as a conversation, because I do want to hear from the South Tampa Bay Chamber and all of the members, and see how I can help either point you in the right direction or give you some more information on that side. So just quick, and so I cover the workforce side, so you'll see I have a lot more to say about that side of things, but I want to make sure I do my colleagues justice by giving them some time for their work. So to start at the beginning, the early stages for the early ed side of things, before COVID-19, there were already reports that 70% of the workforce and working parents are affected by childcare concerns. And so that was before COVID. Now with COVID, with the lack of childcare and everyone working remote and being home, I can only imagine that number has intensified and has grown. And this has been a problem that it's been a problem for employers, and it's been a problem for employees of childcare concerns. So the Chamber a few years ago started taking on this initiative and looking into the differences about it. And we have a report that shows the business case on childcare and what it means for employers and businesses. We have a guide for businesses to start looking into these issues and actually get on the ground and do some of the work. And recently, we just released impact studies across the U.S. on childcare and what it does to the economy. And right now, my colleagues have only done reports in Mississippi, Iowa, Pennsylvania, and Idaho, but they are looking to expand those and to build across the different states to show how different states are tackling childcare concerns. So again, that's all on our foundation website on early ed, but I'm happy to either field some questions or get you to the right people who can answer more if that's of interest to you. On the K-12 side of things, it's all about alignment to the workforce, not working in these silos anymore of teaching students how to get a high school diploma, and then it doesn't connect to anything that we're learning in the business and careers. So on the K-12 side, we have taken a unique approach to those initiatives because all of education is very different across the states. That we're more of highlighting good work and good actors and best practices in this sense of alignment, and when employers are getting more involved in K-12 school districts. And we've been highlighting those through our Voices campaign, through our career labs, and a few others. So, and they're based on issues in certain areas such as, soft skills or CTE, with career technical education, in those areas. So it's pretty easy to go through and find the type of information you're looking for, and to see maybe what other states or programs are doing that you could either, one, reach out and let us know what you're doing, that we could highlight you and your great work in your area, or start to learn from others and maybe try to adopt some of those ideas as well. And so that's in our K-12 sector of things. And then workforce kind of brings it all together, because workforce starts as early as early childhood education and goes all the way through career, and in this world, multiple careers. And so on the workforce side of things, what we're finding is the time to hire is a big problem with employers and a big concern, because it costs a lot of money to keep rehiring, and if the retention isn't good, and to getting new employers on, as well as to full productivity. We just had a hiring report that came out about that 53% of employers are finding that one of their hardest issues to match is the amount of time it gets to full productivity. And what that means is that the alignment isn't working as well. And it's not to point fingers at any stakeholder group, but it's actually to say, how do we fix this as a community together? To say what's being taught, and what do we need in the workforce, and how is it changing and in real time? And how do we work with the education community, training providers, credentialing providers to fix that? Because there are over 730,000 unique credentials in the world right now, or actually, I'm sorry, just in the US right now. And that's through training, that's through CTE, that's through higher ed. But yet we're still not finding the right talent at the right time and at the right price for our different jobs and in-demand skills. So across our initiatives, it comes down to really three main items to kind of keep in mind when I bring these up. And one is engagement, communication, and breaking down barriers. So on the engagement side of things, we have our signature initiative called Talent Pipeline Management, or TPM for short. And it's really using supply chain management principles to build talent supply chains, and that's what employers know well, where we're working with employers and collaboratives to get their data straight, get organized, get their needs in certain industries and job tasks, and be able to then to share that information with their education and training and credentialing providers in their area and start to build preferred providers. So we have a whole curriculum on this, and it's not a silver bullet. This is not a one size fits all. If you do this, you've now accomplished everything in the world. I mean, we don't promise that. But what we do promise is that this is a playbook that employers and the communities can take and try to embed into their current practices and work. And so we've seen a lot of people start from the beginning here and just do all 6 strategies and build out the different data and infrastructure that they need to figure out the problems in their community or the industries that they need to focus on. And we've had other people say, hey, we're already doing, steps 1 and 5. Let's add in some more data and start tracking some things a little bit better. And then we can work on preferred providers or build maybe some helpful incentives for the education community to help align with our needs. And so that's TPM. We're now in 33 states, Florida being one of them. And I know that actually the Tampa Bay partnership is a part of this TPM initiative. I'm not sure exactly to what level they're implementing it in your community, but I do know that in some way that they are involved in this. And so again, we have the full curriculum, tutorials, one-pagers, ways to do this work and work it into your work on our webpage under Talent Pipeline Management. And so that really covers the engagement part. Employers coming together, figuring out their problems, getting organized on the data, and then bringing that to the education community with one, clear voice on needs. Then the communication part is now, how are we organizing that data? How are we making sure that we're signaling our needs in real time and in the way that's effective? And this is through our initiative called the Job Data Exchange, or JDX for short. And what that really is it's twofold. We are working in a fast-paced environment that's workplaces and the shelf life of skills are changing at faster and faster rates. And for instance, in technology, it's in less than 3 months, we have new skill sets that are needed in certain coding or different platforms. So how do we start getting this in real time? And so one way to do that is through a job data standard. How do we organize our information on jobs and make it available to the public so that you can search and discover and find what you need and also get updates as it's happening? And so the best way to think about what a job data standard would look like, because it seems very out there when I first say this to people, is think about how you do travel using Kayak or using Expedia. You're able to find flights and hotels whenever you want. They're updated and instantly to the different changes in time or if the flights are canceled. And you can then price change and gouge and figure out how that's working. And you can also see which airlines and times fit your schedule best. Well, why can't we do that with a job? Why can't we figure out if the skills really meet our needs and if that's really what our credentials show that we can do, or see what we need to upskill or get to be more mobile in our workforce and move up to higher levels and skill sets. And so a job data standard will help do that. And at this point for the JDX, we did a pilot test back in 2018 through 2019. And now at this point, we're trying to actually get to scale and really grow this data standard with HRS and ATS vendors that work on employment. And so we're going to have more and more coming out in the upcoming months on this. But what we really need from Chambers on this front is to help support these efforts, to help look into some of these resources about job data standards, and also help us make the case, or let us know what you need to make the case to start building this to scale in the workforce. Because if we can organize our data and we can put it into a structured format that's in real time, we can actually change how quickly we're hiring and rehiring and even changing skill sets, especially now with COVID-19, with the different workforce that's out there. And so that's communication. That's how we can communicate better, is starting to put information into an organized way. And then the last section in workforce that we need to think about is breaking down barriers. I'm sure that all of you are aware in your community of different silos that are out there in the workforce. And at times we might even fool ourselves that there's not that many silos, or maybe we are more connected. But you'll find when you look in the back end and the infrastructure we built on the education workforce side of things to date is very outdated and very siloed. If you think about K-12 schools and your high school diploma, after you received your diploma, does any of the courses you took or the skill sets or competencies you learned in your K through 12 education, did that transfer anywhere? Can you document that? And you as an individual, do you even hold on to your own? For higher ed, you get there and you get a degree. After you get the degree and you get the very expensive diploma that you put on your wall and you're excited about, what happens then? Does that transfer into your first employment opportunities, and that those skill sets that you learned in Literature 101 or in Calculus 205, did that somehow increase based on you being an engineer or a engine software? To my knowledge, it doesn't do that yet. And then when you upskill and reskill and retrain, how is that being documented? How is that being shown all around? And so what this comes down to is that we need our systems to start to talk to each other. We need what we call interoperability, the ability that you can have your own system and have your own platform, but your systems and platforms need to be able to accept what's out there in the world, accept different documentation and records and data, and be able to read and digest and analyze them. And so through our initiative called the T3 Innovation Network, we're working with over 500 organizations, from government to employees to education institutions, K through 12 schools, and advocacy associations, to try to break down these silos and explain what we need to better communicate and transfer data to make sure that all learning counts, competencies and skills are that new currency, and that we empower each individual learner and worker with their actual data. And now that's a big feat. I mean, right now I say these things and everyone's probably cheering, or I like to believe you're cheering in the background right now. But it's a hard effort, and there's a reason why it hasn't happened and why we're still working on it. But this has been going on for about 3 years now, and we don't have final answers, but we are building the infrastructure slowly. And so if this is of interest to you and you want to learn more, again, on our foundation webpage, we have under the T3 Innovation Network, you can just join, learn more, attend webinars, and as we have more resources coming out, try to share that with your community to grow these areas. So again, engagement, communication, and breaking down barriers would be the best way that we can start to actually improve our workforce for the 21st century and beyond. So that's my quick spiel here on all of our initiatives across the education workforce landscape, and I will open things up for questions or to dive deeper into some of these very complex issues.
Thanks, Josh. We appreciate it. If anybody has any questions, feel free to either write it in the chat or go ahead and just speak up.
Good morning, Joshua. My name is Elise Phillips. I'm coming from Kaiser University in Tampa. I'm the Associate Director of Student Services. And first of all, thank you so much for coming on here. We appreciate you. I wanted to talk to you more about the productivity problem. One of the things that we do in student services is we want to make sure we're matching up our students and getting them employed and getting them into the right, setting them up for success, so to speak. How would you, are there specific sectors that you're looking at that that are in need right now? Of course, besides medical.
I was about to say every sector, but the big ones that we've been seeing, and this kind of goes across our workforce initiatives, definitely in the IT and tech space and cybersecurity. That's a huge area that we've been seeing, and we have a lot of employer collaboratives in Arizona that are working on that, in California. Of course, manufacturing is in every state and is a big industry, and they need a lot of help explaining how the needs and skill sets are changing and getting that into the hands of educators to be able to help with that alignment. And then, of course, like you already noted, the healthcare sector, especially with nurses and specific credentialed healthcare providers, that's also always a huge area. So those are really like the main top three, but honestly, this issue is something that we're seeing across industries and across job functions. And the only thing I wanted to maybe double down on, and I said it earlier on, but I feel like sometimes my comments could get to be one-sided at times. This is a problem that's a community problem. You know, it's not just, you know, the education community isn't giving us qualified talent. I believe that they're doing the best that they can. And same thing with employers. You know, they're demanding, they want more, they want workers and in the right time, in the right place, at the right cost, and making sure that they're getting qualified talent. But yet the signals of those needs and how quickly we're doing that at times is lagging, again, because of that infrastructure. So it's really it's a community approach that has to do this, that we truly believe should be employer-led, but that they might lead it, but they're not doing it alone.
One more question, if you don't mind. Just to talk about that divide, because I know that's one of the things that another organization was trying to do as well. Is there a way that you think that we can combine? Because, you know, from an educational standpoint, you know, we need to know these things, so that way if we need to make adjustments in the classroom, or if we need to make adjustments in like our student services section before they go out into the workforce, that's like information that will turn that person from unqualified to qualified. So do you think that there's a way that we can connect with these, you know, companies so we can give them exactly what they want?
Absolutely. And, you know, that's the answer we get a lot from educators too. It's like, they're excited, they're willing, they're eager, and that's exciting to see. And I think, you know, there's two ways of going about this. There's the old era way, which I believe actually many people are still using, which is, you know, having these partnership convenings and community engagement work that happens, you know, every 2 or 3 months, and then it doesn't happen again for a year, and then it happens every 2 to 3 months. And there's two big concerns with that. One is all of these meetings and consistent meetings and more community outreach and all that. At times you can start to wear out employers, and there's initiative fatigue that will happen if everyone wants to keep doing this. Also, the lag time. If you're only meeting, you know, every 3 to 4 months or every year or 5 years, I mean, by the time you get updated skills, they're already outdated. So that's kind of the current approach that's been happening, and that's what we're trying to change with some of these infrastructure plays that are data and technology based. Is that then how can we maybe lessen the amount of meetings, but be able to have the signals and data be transferred quicker and faster in ways that people can look it up themselves. So you don't have to go seeking for information; you can just find it, or requesting information. You can just find it. But that, again, that's going to take a village, because we need employers and that support to get their information organized and structured using data standards. And we also need the learning community to be ready to accept those data standards and accept the data coming in and be able to digest that. Because if I just send a bunch of employment data and updated information to your systems, you either will spend all week or months, you know, sifting through it, or you won't look at it at all. And so the concern is it's not okay just to dump massive PDFs on people, but it's how do we actually get the data to go into, for instance, like your career advising equipment and technology, and being able to document that and see what the changes are happening. I hope that was helpful. Again, it's a lot of big ideas, but that's kind of what the foundation does, is start thinking about the world of work differently.
Well, thanks again, Josh. If there's no other questions, Jen, do you have a question?
I was going to ask, I love that the foundation is focused on developing the workforce. What are your thoughts on developing entrepreneurs, building strong entrepreneurs? I am part of the business advisory committee. I'm chairwoman of that at Hillsborough Community College, and we were awarded a grant. So we have an early entrepreneur venture fund, and I got very involved with that organization through their entrepreneurship program. And we are reshaping the face of American business by creating strong entrepreneurs at the seedling state, which I feel like has been kind of neglected in the last couple decades for support. So what are you all doing, or what are your thoughts on how to engage with that sector, to engage with places like the community colleges? I mean, we have 3 programs here that are entrepreneurial oriented: our HCC, which is our community college, Tampa, University of Tampa, and then we also have USF having a full entrepreneurship program. So how are you guys engaging with that group? How are you helping develop strong entrepreneurs from the seedling state? And if you aren't, how can I connect with you to help you do so?
Well, first off, to your last part of your question, would be happy to engage more on this and talk it through and hear what you've been doing and see how we can play a stronger role in that. So I want to keep that open, and I believe Chris might have my my email, or I can put it in the chat as well if that would be helpful.
I know how to get Chris, so I'll get it from him.
Okay, great. In terms of entrepreneurs as a whole, so I think it comes down to the learner and worker being able to get the right information, to become an entrepreneur, to look into the right industries, to understand what the different skill sets are. And that is what the level we're trying to get down to. At this point, our first tier and first contact point is getting at the organizational level. How do you get employer information to a credentialing, training, community college, and any type of supply side provider? How do you get that information there first and for them to be able to use it? The next tier is then getting it directly to the learner, either through the organization or in the future directly from the employer right to the person looking for the job opportunities. And so we are, I think that is the big part of looking at this future of work and where does the workforce change and how do you build entrepreneurs, is understanding the labor market and the talent marketplace. And right now we only have a limited view of what that looks like. And when we do have the view, we don't even know how dated or in time it really is. So that's kind of the approach we're taking at when we think about that. But happy to work with you and think about maybe some new approaches or ways we can double down on that.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. And also just because Shane got so much kickback in the earlier for his background, he runs a program called the Jim Moran Institute, which many of the students leave the program that we're in, spend some time out there working, and then jump into Jim Moran to take them to the next level from seedling into trying to work towards second stage businesses. So we've got quite a robust program down here. It's across multiple different working entities. And so we all tend to play together and work together really well. So it'd be a really great place for you to kind of connect in and see how things are shaping up, maybe a little different from other places. We'll connect offline because we're involved with NACCE. NACCE's rolling out a second phase of the Early Entrepreneur Venture Fund across community colleges with the EEVF group. So there's a lot of really great things kind of happening here that I think would partner well with what you all are trying to achieve too.
That sounds great. You know, the great thing about these briefings, as much as I'm explaining what we're doing and sharing resources, it's also a great time to learn what everyone else is doing around the US and in their community. So always happy to take that up.
Awesome. I look forward to
it. Anybody else have any other questions before we let Josh or Tom go? Well, again, I want to thank Tom and Josh for your time today. He was very insightful and we really, really appreciate it. So thank you so much. And with that, I think we're going to conclude today.
Awesome. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Josh. And thank you, Chris. Tom and Josh, or Tom will be providing the slide deck to me, and I'll make sure everybody on the call receives that as well. Don't forget to download the chat. I see a lot of good contact information in there. So make sure you download that. It's that 3 little dots to the right-hand side. Thank you guys for joining. Yeah.
Do you want to grab a quick photo? Can you do a screenshot of everybody?
I sure can. Let me get one up here. Thanks for the reminder, Jen. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Oh, wait, let's try one more time. Oh, not the easiest thing over here. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Perfect, guys. Awesome. Thank you all. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, we'll be on here for about another 10 minutes. I hope everybody has a good rest of your week.